It's the offseason in college football, which means I got to come up with ideas to keep you entertained nonstop until spring practice is underway. But thankfully, FanDuel did my job for me by releasing the win totals for all major conferences going into next season. And today I figured, why don't we go ahead and look at some of the biggest lines and some of the biggest storylines that are going to invoke the SEC in 2024. But before we begin, if you are new here, welcome on into the channel, people. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment telling me which betting line do you think is the best going into 2024 among SEC contenders. Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, best of bros, college football aficionados, SEC faithful about this channel, because we're on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking about our favorite sport daily. Continue to follow me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson, Twitter, X, Instagram, wherever social media you got. That way, conversations surrounding our favorite sport never have to stop flowing. So, the SEC win total presented by FanDuel. So interesting that we do not have a single team over 10.5 wins, which for some people, that would mean that your conference is a little lackluster. You don't have a legit superstar team. You don't have that creme de la creme type of roster that is going to command excellence throughout the regular season. That's one way of thinking about it. The way that I view it is the level of competition is so strong, the margin of error is so weak. That's why you have 4 teams listed with 9.5 wins. You have 2 teams listed with 8.5 wins. And then you have a couple of teams that are listed with fewer than 5.5 wins. So let's go ahead and break down some of the biggest names. Alabama comes in at #1, 9-5, or 9.5. That's strange. That's really weird. That's honestly probably the craziest thing that you can imagine about Alabama, because they haven't had this win total since 2007. Anybody remember what happened in 2007? A guy by the name of Nicholas Lou Saban left the NFL to come to Tuscaloosa and eventually create a dynasty. Well, that dynasty is still alive. It's just going to have a new general at the command post, Kalen DeBoer. And with Kalen DeBoer, there's going to come a little bit of growth. There's going to come a little bit of trepidation. You also have a slew of games that I don't know are going to be completely in your favor. You play Wisconsin in week 3 in Madison. That is a game that when you look on paper, you feel confident in Alabama. I really wouldn't. I don't know what I'm going to get in this Alabama team. And I know I'm going to get better results from what I saw last season underneath Luke Fickell. You also travel to Oklahoma right before the Iron Bowl. That is trap game central. Oklahoma could be hitting its stride at the right time, and you can't afford to look ahead to get ready to get back in Bryant-Denny Stadium. That way, you don't have to face off against the Tigers and think maybe 2023 is under the books. You still play LSU. You still play Tennessee. Tennessee's on the road in Neyland Stadium. Remember what happened last time. It's very challenging if you are an Alabama fan, even the proudest of Alabama fans, to say, I believe that 9.5 is a good line. If you were a betting man right now, it's very easy to understand why you want to take the under. And I understand why many people right now are taking the under. This is an Alabama team that I think with the right time and the right personnel, they can get everything that they want. They can be a national contender. It just may take a year under the hood to get those little kinks working out before we actually see Kalen DeBoer take the big time step. So just be cautiously optimistic when it comes to Alabama. Missouri, 9.5. This is interesting. And the reason it's interesting is because there are words being spread around college football communities that Missouri hit its peak last year. Missouri is only going to be an 11-2 team. Last season was a flash in the pan, and Vegas is basically saying, here, you want some free money? Go ahead and bet the under. That's literally what they're saying when it comes to this. There's reason for that belief. I look at the offense. They are going to be sound as all hell. And you know that the returning production is going to be second to none. Brady Cook, Theo Wees, Luther Burden Jr. all returning. That should make any Mizzou fan salivate at the mouth. And you brought in 2 exceptional transfers, Caden Green on the offensive line. Plus, you also brought in Marcus Carroll from Georgia State. That's your plug-and-play replacement for Cody Schrader. But you did lose a lot of defensive talent. And I'm not just talking about Robinson and Hopper. I'm talking about the man that was calling the shots in Blake Baker. Baker took a job down at LSU. He's now crossing the enemy lines, and he's joining Brian Kelly to hopefully bring the Tigers back to national relevancy, more so than they already are. And so that is a key factor that I'm not sure you're going to be able to build off of. Yeah, you bring in a veteran experienced defensive coordinator with reps in the SEC, but also he comes from South Alabama. And my question is, who was calling the plays? Was it Kane Womack or was it you? Who is the one actually in charge of the defense? Because the SEC is its own entity. And if you have a bad showcase on one Saturday, that might be the reason why you're sitting at home early December, not making it in the college football playoff. Georgia, 10.5. Many people thought that Georgia would probably be that one team that actually stands out with 11 wins on their radar. It's hard. It's very challenging. You look at Georgia's schedule last year, it's a cupcake compared to this year. And it got tougher along the stretch. The Auburn game, very challenging. The Mizzou game, extremely challenging. Well, now you get to play Texas. Now you get to play Georgia. Now you get to play Alabama. Now you get to have a schedule that people are going to say, oh, they don't belong in the college football playoff. Who have they gone up against? Them, those teams, the ones that we just saw last year make it to the Final Four. Yeah, they're on the schedule now. It's a roster that is returning its key players. They also brought in 2 exceptional transfers, really more than that. But Trevor Etienne being the big one, and Ben Yasurik, the tight end from Stanford. He's going to be a plug-and-play factor as the replacement for Brock Bowers, opposite of Dylan Bell. If the offense continues to hum the way that it did last season, and the defense can pick up a little bit of strength, then I think this is an easy bet. Easily, Georgia's going to be the favorite to win the SEC. They should be the favorites to win the SEC, not only because of returning talent, but because of the man calling the shots. Even though Nick Saban is gone and we will never see it duplicate again, someone's got to take over the mantle as the new face of the SEC. That's Kirby Smart until further notice. Maybe Josh Heupel gets involved. Maybe you could throw Drake in the mix. Lane Kiffin's definitely, I think, going to be involved. But right now, it's Kirby Smart or bust. LSU at 9.5 wins. This is the boom or bust team this year. Because I could see it going one of 2 ways. I could see LSU going 11-2. They handle business against everybody. They're undefeated when they go play against Ole Miss in week 6. But they have a tough schedule. The thing about LSU that I appreciate more than any other team in the SEC, they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're saying we are not afraid in the slightest to take on competition. They opened the year in Las Vegas against UCLA. They got games against South Alabama. They got games against UCLA. On top of that, an SEC schedule of 8 opponents. So their non-conference games are truly going to factor into if they are qualified to be an SEC contender, or let me phrase that, not an SEC contender, but a legit college football playoff contender. Because a loss in week 1 to Miller Moss doesn't take you out of the running, but it certainly puts a lot of pressure on you to go 9-3, to go 10-2. Because without it, you're battling upstream with styrofoam paddles. That's really what you're left with. Florida, 5.5. Oh boy, Florida. This is too high. There is no other way to say it. This is far too high for Florida. And I like Billy Napier. I like Graham Mertz. I even did a video yesterday talking about the additions added in this offseason on SEC Unfiltered. I like this Florida team. But they're playing 8 teams this season with a win total projected of 8.5 or higher. There's never been a schedule like this in college football. Go ahead and say that your out-of-conference schedule is every team in your state. Minus the one team in Northern Alabama. Florida, you play Florida State, Miami, UCF. All of them improved this offseason. All of them got better at the key positions, primarily quarterback, and all are expecting to be contenders in their respective conferences. That's your out-of-conference schedule. Not to mention that you still have to play against Georgia. Not to mention you still have games against Texas A&M. Not to mention you still have games against a ton of other opponents to where it's a toss-up. Stanford's the game. Stanford's the one game right now on Florida's schedule where you can say, yep, W. They're not going to go defeated this year. Everything else, it's a toss-up. You can make an argument that they can win every game or they can lose every game. And more recency biased, you're kind of leaning the latter than the former. I like Graham Mertz. I like Billy Napier, but this is a schedule with that line. I would be hammering the under right now if I was in Vegas. Next up, Texas, 10.5. They're the newcomers. How are they this high? Well, it's a product of the system, and it's a product more so about the contingencies that we've seen underneath Steve Sarkisian. Growth every year. 5-7 finish in year 1, 8-5 finish in year 2, college football playoff appearance, and a throwaway from going to the national championship for the first time since 2009. They've added in a lot of players. The way that Steve Sarkisian hit the transfer portal this offseason was the way that Nick Saban wanted his roster built in 2020. And that's emulate of what you're going to see on the 40 acres this year, without question. Yeah, you have Jonte Cook, but you bring over Silas Bolden. That is an elite speed threat that can work in every area of the field. Matthew Golden from Houston, a former All-Big 12 player. You also brought over Isaiah Bond. And the names that you brought in defensively, guys like Andrew Makuba, guys like Trey Moore, they're plug-and-play difference makers that were studs in their respective conferences. So Steve Sarkisian is building off of what we know, which is consistency, growth on the recruiting trail, development of talent. But he's also adding in these plug-and-play starters that are going to turn a few losses into wins. Yeah, they have a couple of tough games on the schedule. They play Georgia. They have a matchup later on in the year against Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. In the Cotton Bowl, Red River Showdown. They have these games, but Texas being the second team, that's not shocking, and it really shouldn't shock that many fans. You look at the returning production. More importantly, you look at what is going to be building off of this year. They have a shot of owning the SEC the second they touch down on July 1st. Two more teams for you. Next up, Texas A&M, 8.5. A&M's a wild card. From a coaching standpoint alone, just straight up Mike Elko, I believe that Texas A&M can win 9 games this year, without question. Mike Elko took a roster that went 3-9 with basically the same players at Duke in 2021 and turned them into an ACC contender. They went 9-4 and he won ACC Coach of the Year. Do not tell me that this man working with 4-star and 5-star talent can't get the best version of Texas A&M coming out. But you really have to win some of your early games. You got a game against Notre Dame in week 1. You have the game against Arkansas in week 6, in Jerry World. You have a game against Florida in week 3. Those are all testament matchups that are going to help you break this 8.5 line. You have to win at least 2 of those 3. If you get past that, you feel comfortable playing Auburn. You feel comfortable playing Mississippi State. You feel content playing against a South Carolina. And at that point, it just leads down to the stretch. Can you get enough done to when you head into Thanksgiving weekend facing off against Texas? Maybe you're sitting at 9-2 and you're fighting for double-digit wins instead of trying to get the 9-3. Last one, Tennessee for you, 8.5. I'm shocked at this line, to be completely honest. I liked what they did in the transfer portal a lot. They brought over Chris Brazzell, a wide receiver with over 900 yards last year for Tulane. They brought over Lance Hurd, a really good offensive lineman that can build with the trenches for the next 2 to 3 years. They have the quarterback in Nico Iamaleava. I mean, everybody is already petting him to be the next great SEC passer. And the reason why is because this was hand-selected by Josh Heupel. Heupel's been working with transfers since getting to Knoxville, whether it be Joe Milton starting week 1, then you bring in Hendon Hooker, then Hooker's your starter all of 2022 before the torn ACL. This is his shot to run the offense that he envisions, not the offense that is granted with him with the limitations brought on by Hooker, brought on by Milton. This is a reason to believe that this year, yes, Tennessee can hit its stride. Offensively, they return Brew McCoy. That's a massive get for a guy like Nico Iamaleava. The offensive line is still pretty sound. You got to replace the production lost by Jalen Wright and Jabari Small, but running backs grow on trees, according to College Football Addicts. So we know that Tennessee is in a good spot. They also have the blessing of playing Alabama at home this year. So in a new year with a new coach in your own backyard, you may actually have an advantage in this game. So the 8.5 line to me really should be leaning closer towards 9.5. I think this is a 10-2 team on paper. I think that they could easily make it to Atlanta. And I think that they could easily be a team to fight for in the college football playoff, especially if comes mid-October, like the Alabama game. That's a breakout performance for Nico Iamaleava. And then he eventually has these type of performances week in and week out to where you're just sitting back going, hey, where was Tennessee in week 2? They were just waiting a couple of weeks to get everything unfolded. That's the way I view Tennessee this year. I would be easily taking the 8.5 line. I think if they're a 10-2 team on paper, and more importantly, if they can hit their wagon right before the start of meaningful conference games, yeah, very challenging to say that this is not going to be a team that carries weight going into the SEC. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts. What is the best line going into 2024 among SEC schools? Tell everybody about this channel, your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, best of bros. Follow me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson, Twitter, X, Instagram. Hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode of Just Saying It. And until next time, I'm Cole Thompson. See you later, folks.